Welcome to the Compliance Experts podcast, hosted by Vartan Consultancy. Miles Vartan and his guests, as experts in compliance and risk management, will guide you carefully and with clarity through the many sectors of compliance like health and safety, ISO and operator licenses, and the complexity of customs regulations. They'll also be talking about the latest legislation, global trade news, and the hot topics as they happen.
So good morning, everyone. This is the Compliance Experts, and today we're doing a podcast, and we thought we would look at how full customs controls have come into the UK and what the impact has been, to give you some more information possibly that you'll find useful, that we've picked up as the days have gone on. As recently as this morning, where a client of ours has had a trailer stuck in Harwich, and possibly then talk about other areas that our clients are asking questions around. So I would like to just do a few introductions first. I'm Miles Vartan, Managing Director of Vartan Consultancy and owner of the Compliance Experts. With me is Neil Bird, our Senior Consultant, an expert in the true definition on everything to do with customs compliance. And then on the line we have Alan Long from Collaborate, Customs Consultancy, who helps us understand the translation of legislation through to reality, and also Sean Turner. Sean, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, Miles. Yeah, it's Sean Turner. I'm a senior VAT manager at the London office at Menzies. I've got a bit of a specialism in movement of goods, customs, import-export side of things, but a VAT specialist ultimately.
A learned colleague of ours in the community in Felixstowe said to me after we heard we were going to leave the EU, said to me, "Don't worry, Miles, we will sort it out. We're in logistics." And I said to him, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, we always find a solution. Don't worry about it." Controls have come in on the 1st of January, at 1 minute past 11 on the 31st of December, and we are not seeing a whole load of chaos in front of us, although we are encountering problems. The Institute of Export and International Trade have done a survey very recently, asked confident traders, how confident are you with trading with the EU in a post-Brexit environment? More than 2/3, or 70% of respondents, indicated they were confident trading with the EU. Just under 2/3, 64% of those surveys said they'd undertaken additional training to adjust to the new post-Brexit trade rules, and nearly half had sought external support in the shape of a customs consultant or a freight forwarder, while 21% had hired additional staff to deal with the new rules. Those who have been listening intently will have noticed that about half of those who responded would have been worried, negative, and had done very little about it. I'm going to go to everybody on the phone first of all and just ask, especially maybe if we could start with you, Neil. Everybody just contribute in as you feel fit. But Neil, give us just your overview as to how you think it has gone.
I think we have to give some credit to HMRC for the preparation and the amount of work that they did in bringing this to people's attention. So I think the reality is that if people had wanted to find out how to deal with this, then the tools and facilities were made available for them to do it. But unfortunately, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't necessarily make it drink. So unfortunately, there are always going to be those people who will bury their head in the sand and hope that this all goes away. But I think for the most part, people have realised their responsibilities as regards these 1st of January changes, and generally people, I think, have actually got to grips with GVMS, GMRs, pre-lodged declarations reasonably well. As you say, we are still encountering some issues where people are not quite sure of the codes or the correct reference numbers that they should utilise to create their GMRs. We have had some questions around mixed model ports, which, to offer a little bit of explanation on that, is a situation where an inventory-linked temporary storage location can still selectively choose to use GBMS if people are moving, for example, driver-accompanied vehicles through such locations. They may wish to get ahead of themselves in terms of customs clearance by pre-lodging declarations. and providing that you talk to the ferry company that you're making your booking with, then there is the ability for you to create a pre-lodged declaration and a GVMS reference for a vehicle that is coming through an inventory linked location. But of course, you do need the cooperation of the ferry line, be that Stena, DFDS, P&O, whoever that happens to be. But that is something that you can do. So I think generally the authorities have done as much as they can to keep the traffic moving through the RoRo locations, and really there is no excuse for people not educating themselves as to what they need to do.
I've had people talk to me. I think maybe Sean has had clients of his speaking to him too about the fact that the system really hasn't been fully tested yet. So we had a bit of a quirky Christmas, New Year break scenario where national holidays fell on weekends. So people possibly have been taking 2 weeks. You would have had a pre-Christmas stocking up situation. So maybe the system hasn't been fully tested anyway yet. And that as we get into next week and we've got most people back at work, people are going to start looking at their stock levels again, placing their orders. I'm wondering if, in fact, we could see a bit of a surge towards the border coming from Europe to the UK and then see how the systems work. Because if a couple of trailers get refused at entry to ports because they haven't had a pre-lodged entry submitted, and the system says, well, you can't come on my ferry, then is that going to create roadworks? I suppose we'll have to wait and see. So, Sean, have you? We had a chat yesterday about what your clients have been saying, and you haven't really had any red flags thrown at you, had you?
No, I mean, most of it was from last year, obviously following the initial Brexit changes. We saw a huge surge during the first 6 months of the year, but that kind of calmed down a bit. So the 1st of January changes have just come in terms of what I'm seeing, wouldn't necessarily impact things on a VAT from a VAT point of view, but we're still seeing the same things coming through all the time. Postponed import back accounting being one. I guess a particular problem which we had a recent issue with a client is Northern Ireland, and the problems there, potential problems with getting goods into Northern Ireland and the TSS system. That was something they had to deal with last week, and that seems to be perhaps causing a few issues. But as I just mentioned there, the main one that I do see is treating postponed import VAT correctly. And even, I think, as we said yesterday, Miles, people still aren't necessarily fully aware of postponed import VAT accounting and what does it actually mean? How do you get the entries into your VAT return? And also realising it is a true cash flow benefit and it should be taken advantage of.
So the headlines for those listening to Sean talking about postponed import VAT accounting were, and still are when you read the border operating model, that you don't need to worry about import VAT. You'll be able just to submit it as part of your quarterly VAT return. Fantastic, full stop, move on. And we are pretty certain that a lot of the people, certainly if they come from an operational background like me and they don't want to talk about VAT anyway, all go a bit hazy when people talk about VAT. Sean, just give us a few points on how the postponement of paying VAT works and how you can maybe play that to your advantage.
Yeah, I mean, obviously under the traditional model, which you can still use, you would physically pay the cash out when the goods are entered, and you pay your import VAT or defer it through a deferment account, or your freight forwarder will pay on your behalf and defer it, then they'll charge you for it. So then you've got to wait until you get your C79 import VAT certificate and reclaim that on your VAT return. So there is a cash flow hit there where you've got to pay it and later reclaim it. Now, if you're using the postpone method, which all VAT registered importers can now do, you don't physically pay the cash, but you have to make your forwarder customs broker aware that you're going to use postponed import VAT accounting, so it can be indicated on your customs declaration. And you also have to register through the CDS, the system that's coming in to replace Chief, which is live for this side of things. You have to register online and obtain your import VAT statements, and then use that as evidence to put it through your VAT return. But the important point is it must be declared on both sides of the return as output tax and input tax. So whoever's doing your VAT return, whoever's doing your systems accounting, needs to make the correct postings to get that into both sides of the VAT return. Sets off to zero. There's no cash flow for the business because there's no physical payment, and it's just dealt with in the one VAT return. So it's definitely an advantage, but you do have to set it up correctly and get it entered to the return in the right way.
Now, it occurred to me when I was setting up this podcast today that if we tried to do this several years ago and no one had actually said we're going to leave the EU, we would have maybe been really scratching around as to things to say. But I mean, sitting in front of me here, I must have 15 bits of paper which I've sort of sourced off the internet with various opinions and updates from all sorts of organisations about how to find a border inspection post and how to speak to your driver on GVMS and all this type of stuff. I'd be really interested to hear from all of you. Do you think that this whole situation has turned out worse than we thought or better than we thought? Alan, you're going to have a view on this, I know. And we don't normally, on the compliance experts, we don't normally verge into political views, but feel free.
Well, I'm not going to get political, but what I will say is that when all this kicked off, for one of the better words, then the general feeling was that the longer crossing services to Europe would be able to cope, because if you've got a 7 or 8 hour crossing, then manifest information, which kicks off the inventory process, is still possible. So it's possible to get your manifest into your community system, and it's possible to pre-lodge your declarations. So the fear was always that the very short sea crossings, such as Dover or Wales to Ireland, would be the ones to suffer. I know that Miles has already said it's been fairly quiet. We haven't had many reports of issues, although there are some hauliers who've complained or reported being stuck in customs controls in Calais for 4 days and up to 8 hour queuing in Calais. But I think because January is usually a quiet month, particularly the first couple of weeks, it won't be until next month we'll clear a picture on the really short sea crossings. It's also been mentioned that there have been teething problems with GVMS, the Goods Vehicle Movement Service. So hopefully January's quiet period will give HMRC and their IT people enough time to fix those problems. As I said, no politics.
No politics, exactly. But the train coming through the tunnel, which we can see at the other end, is going to lead to more and more drivers being told as they're coming across that, well, this is the point actually, isn't it? The loads on their trailers are going to be attached to a message to ask them to go to an inspection point. Now, for those who are listening, you're sitting at home, or in fact you're not. You're in bed. It's fast asleep. You're trying to catch up with some sleep, and your phone goes because you actually have to be on. You've decided you're going to have the duty phone, and you get a message saying that your trailer on the ferry from Calais to Dover has got to go to an inspection point. If you read the official instructions, the driver has the ability to have an app on his phone that will enable him to see if he needs to go to a inland border facility. But effectively, if he doesn't do that, then it's the haulier who employs him has to tell the driver to go to the inland inspection post. I really find it difficult to get in my head how all those hundreds of trailers on ferries heading to the UK at the same time, how that's actually going to work. And there are tips for hauliers from the Border and Protocol Delivery Group update, which come out every now and again. They take you to links, but it actually says in the third paragraph here, if drivers don't have a smartphone with internet access, the haulier manager will need to pass this message on to the driver by phone. Easy to write by somebody from this protocol group, but possibly they've never worked in the traffic office and never had to try and get hold of a driver who possibly doesn't speak the same language as them. So I think that is still going to creak a bit, and we'd be very interested to hear from all of you, anecdotally possibly, or if you've got any details, let us know. We are moving towards other deadlines now in the year, and tomorrow, if you're exporting composite goods, food goods to Europe, you're going to have a European health certificate. If you go on to our LinkedIn post, you'll see a LinkedIn post about that, and takes you to the DEFRA easy to use. It says easy to use decision tree. I would challenge that anybody looking at it to see if that is easy to use, but that will tell you if you need to have a European health certificate. And then on the 1st of July, certification and physical checks will be introduced for all remaining regulated animal byproducts, all meat and meat products, and all remaining high-risk food not of animal origin. So now we came across the situation, Neil, didn't we, with phytosanitary certificates, and BIFA, British International Freight Association, have come up with a solution for that up until the 1st of July.
Yeah, I think this is where I think some people have missed the fact that whilst the requirement for export health certificates and physical inspections start on the 1st of July, from the 1st of January, you have been obligated to pre-notify imports of such products through a system called IPAFS, IPAFFS. And I think there have, again, been some teething problems with IPAFs. And once you've made your pre-notification on IPAFs, you have a reference number which has to go onto your customs declaration. It would appear that there has been a glitch in the system where IPAFs has been asking for phytosanitary certificates, which are not required until the 1st of July. So there is a workaround. I think the BIFA guidance, which you're referring to, Miles, actually suggested that what you should do is submit a blank phytosanitary certificate, and apparently that is going to be acceptable as a workaround at the moment.
So a blank document, with nothing on a piece of paper, is going to make the system work, which I think maybe says a whole lot about how we've got through this situation. I did check the Conservative Party's gathering or party schedule, which was published on the Telegraph today, and there wasn't one on the 1st of January, accordingly, although there have been about 20 since. But it doesn't appear that the politicians have had to be too bothered about this, what we're all talking about this morning, maybe because we're all talking about COVID as well. And with COVID still not going away and people driving vehicles into the UK, I think there's going to be an additional issue with drivers having to have lateral flow tests and with them, and on top of having to adhere to all the customs regulations as well. So in September this year, following on from July, we're going to have the introduction of the Customs Declaration Service, which is going to replace Chief, the customs handling of import and export freight system. For those long in the tooth, we've all been using Chief as long as we can remember, and where it's going to be for imports will be switched off. And I think there's a date set 22nd of September.
I think it's the end of September, Miles. I think
end of September.
Chief will. Important to remember that this is imports only. So for exports, you can continue to use Chief until the end of March 2023. But at the moment, HMRC's deadline is the end of September 2022. And they are quite adamant that Chief will be switched off for imports at the end of September 2022. So CDS will be live from the 1st of October. So I would encourage anybody listening to our podcast who is involved in import customs clearance, if you are a customs broker, speak to your software provider, your customs software provider, urgently about what preparations they are making for CDS, and get yourself some training, because the CDS system is very, very different to Chief. You are no longer looking at boxes on a C88 form. You are now looking at completing data elements. So this is a very significant change, and anyone involved in importing or customs clearance needs to be aware of the changes.
Now, Sean, a lot of your clients are interested in imports and exports, and so quick calculation, in just over 200 days, a new system's going to come into place. Some of your clients, amazingly enough, will have only just realised that they need to get involved with customs agents, but as they start ringing to find a customs agent to help them, they'll realise that actually there aren't enough customs agents in place to keep up with the amount of customs clearances that are required. I'm intrigued to find out as to whether or not, with that relatively short period of time, how many of them actually know that CDS is coming in? How many of them actually express to you any concerns at all about the fact that finding an agent has been very difficult, and they seem to having to pay quite a lot of money to get a customs clearance done? I use that term very advisably, because I'm sure some people think that actually they're not paid anywhere near enough to a customs clearance. The system is going to squeak, and it isn't long before this new system comes into place, along with everything else we've already spoken about. Is the community, is the international trade community living in a sort of full sense of security because they've got more important things to think about every day? And do we need to bring this to their attention pretty damn quickly?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Miles. Last year, I think it was all reactive. People were coming to me, the phone was ringing continuously. I need to do this, I need to do that, without much forethought or planning. Everything was just reacting to what was going on. And as you say there, yeah, we can put them in touch with customs brokers, but there aren't enough to go round. And obviously it's going to cost. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we need to get the message out there now, publicise this, tell them that, yeah, Chief is going to go off at the end of September and March next year. And you do need to be prepared, otherwise you're going to fall over. I noticed actually there's some publications coming out from HMRC which are throwing these dates around, but it's like anything. Do people actually read the stuff that comes out from HMRC when the letter lands on their desk or the email comes out? So I think, yeah, this needs to be publicised a lot, and now.
I know some people, Sean, who print everything off, all right? And if you printed everything off at HMRC published, you'd soon have to have a bigger office, wouldn't you? Because it's just unbelievable. Alan, did I hear you about to come in there? I was about to bring you in.
Yeah, you did. I think the issue that you mentioned about the volumes that agents or importers and therefore agents will have to deal with, it will happen irrespective of CDS, just because of Brexit. So whether or not CDS comes in on time or whatever is not really relevant. Those importers will still need to find agents to cope with the astronomical increase in declaration volumes. The big fear I have is that even when CDS was first contracted for, the volumes of declarations were estimated pre-Brexit. So this CDS has been going before the decision to leave the EU. So that was the volumes based on that. It's been beefed up, we're told, to accommodate the increase in volumes, but only time will tell whether that beefing up will work. As you said, CDS is a completely different beast to Chief because it's a distributed system. So you put your declaration into CDS and CDS calls out to various other systems within the HMRC environment, for example, just tariff or accounting, whereas with Chief, everything is on that single system. So that means with CDS, if any of the elements outside of the core declaration service breaks down, the whole thing breaks down.
I suppose something to ask as well. I suppose something to ask as well. I know you said, Miles, that they're sticking to their guns on these dates, but does anyone expect any further delays? You know, they could turn around the week before and say, actually, no, we're extending the period for Chief. Are you expecting that, do you think?
I think that's unlikely, Sean, to be fair, because as Alan has already alluded to, CDS is years behind its scheduled implementation, which is primarily down, as Alan said, to Brexit and the fact that CDS was commissioned before the referendum. So, as Alan rightly said, it had a capacity that was built into it, which was going to be greater than Chief, but only a capacity based upon anticipated growth in international trade. So, as Alan rightly said, the huge volume of EU declarations hadn't been factored into CDS, so it had to go back to the drawing board and be beefed up, as Alan suggested. So that's why it has been so late in being implemented. So I think HMRC are going to be very reluctant to delay it any further. But the one thing that we haven't yet mentioned, which is potentially going to impact all this as well, is, of course, delayed declarations only finished on the 31st of December 2021. So there's still potentially an enormous backlog of supplementary declarations that have to go through the system as well. It concerns me that obviously people's attention has now switched to how they're going to get live imports into the country. And I don't think there's going to be very much attention being paid to the huge backlog of supplementary declarations waiting to be done. And I think that's a significant point as well.
Can I just ask a question on that, actually? Sorry, Alan.
Go on, Sean.
Jumping in there. On the delayed declarations, I noticed that doesn't include Irish ports. So goods coming across from the Republic of Ireland into Great Britain, you can still delay your declarations. That's correct, isn't it?
Not that I was aware of, Sean. I wasn't aware of that, I must admit.
I'm pretty sure there was something from HMRC saying that for delayed declarations, you can still still do that for goods coming from Republic of Ireland.
Into the UK or Northern Ireland, Sean?
Into the whole of Great Britain.
Into the whole of Great Britain, yeah. You can do delayed declarations from the EU into the UK, but you're going to have the authorization to allow you to do that. Prior to the end of the year, you could claim that you were bringing your goods into something called entry into declarants records. So you're doing a simplified frontier declaration, and then you had 175 days to get your supplementary declaration done. That ceased at the end of the year. And now moving forward, you can carry on doing deferred declarations, but you have to have the authorization. So that's possibly what that related to. But you can't bring goods in from the EU, including the Republic of Ireland, into the UK and then wait for 175 days to do the declaration. That's the case. That's the situation at the moment. Correct, Neil? I'm pretty certain I'm right on that one.
I'll check it, Miles. I'm intrigued. I know there was some relaxation for imports from Ireland because of the fact that the Northern Ireland Protocol is obviously still being discussed and negotiated between the UK and the EU. So some of the rules that apply to the EU have been temporarily suspended for the Republic of Ireland. But I must admit, Sean, I hadn't heard that. I will check that.
It was during, from what I read, it was during this current negotiations and talks on the protocol. So we'll have a check.
I was certainly aware of, as I say, some relaxation in rules from Ireland because of the ongoing negotiations, but I wasn't aware that they'd still extended the delayed declaration scheme. Thanks for raising that point, Sean. That's really interesting. We'll have to check that for you and find out what the latest position on Ireland is, and we'll come back to you on that if that's okay.
Okay, thanks.
So, as we talked about this huge amount of paper around on our desks, we often get updates from the Border and Protocol Delivery Group with a very smart Cabinet Office logo at the top right-hand side of the page. And they talk about the UK single trade window. And I was going to bring this in a couple of seconds ago because I think the idea is that the government, through HMRC and Border Force, are working to try and make sure that those involved in importing and exporting find it easier. They'll find the systems more functional, have to do less work, and create a single trade window as part of a key component of the 2025 border strategy. Now, Alan, the comments you were making about CDS, and possibly you've got more years than us than most people, but in terms of the overall strategy, isn't it right to say that there is a direction, a weighted direction heading towards simplifications with the idea that technology will help us make this whole process simpler?
Yes, you are, and thank you for divulging my aging years. I can remember pre-chief, unlike most people. I can remember when we had that postponed accounting until Gordon Brown decided he needed some ready cash and did away with it in the mid-80s. So thank you for that.
I remember that as well, Alan.
Yeah.
So don't feel too bad about it. I was actually doing customs entries in the mid-80s.
Right. My fear is that that the aim for a single window may be delayed yet again. Government's been talking about this for as long as I can remember, and it never quite materialises. Technology certainly will be able to play a part in making it happen if it does happen, but I just worry that there'll be so much talking into government or intra-government that we may never get there. Not in my lifetime, I don't think. But 2025 is very ambitious.
Can I just come in there, Miles?
Certainly.
I'd like to entirely agree with Alan on that point. The single trade window, it's not really so much of a simplification as a way in which the communication with various government agencies becomes easier, because you have a situation at the moment where, depending upon the type of product you're importing, you've already mentioned the 1st of July and the requirement for submission of additional documentation for product of animal origin. One of the challenges at the moment is you have so many government agencies involved potentially in the importing of your goods. So you make your customs, your declaration to customs, and you give customs a significant amount of information. And then invariably, you have to give the same information to the port health authorities. Potentially, you have to give the same information to the Forestry Commission or Trading Standards, depending on what sort of information, what sort of product you're importing. You may have to apply for the license for the goods, so you have to give that information again to the DIT. The point of the single trade window is that you only give your information to the government once, and then they use technology to distribute that to the various departments that need that information. But Alan is absolutely right that they have been talking about this for, probably, as you said, Alan, almost since the inception of Chief back in the 1980s.
Even before that to some degree, but yeah.
Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But like you said, Alan, whether we'll ever see it in our lifetime, I'm not sure. But I know that during the course of last year, we took part in a number of surveys which were run by the BPDG that Miles mentioned earlier. We actually put several of our customers in touch with them as well, so that they could talk directly to our clients about their import experiences. So they're certainly making a lot of noise about it, Alan. But whether that will actually lead to anything, I don't know.
It sort of chimes alongside though how Alan explained the rationale and the thoughts behind CDS. So CDS does the work for you and reaches out to the various systems, and you've just pretty much said the same thing, Neil, haven't you, with the single window? So there's some movement towards it, and I suppose we just sit tight and work hard and keep ourselves going. I mean, looking towards the future, we're waiting for the much vaunted free trade agreement to be ratified. We're looking for Mrs. Truss to sort out the Northern Ireland Protocol. We're waiting to see if the various free ports not only they've all now got their taxation designation approved, with the Thames Freeport actually achieving a customs designation as well, the only one so far. And then we've got these various deadlines are heading towards us, plus CDS this year. So there's an awful lot to go on, and I've no doubt that possibly in maybe 6 months' time we should meet again and just see how we're doing. See if we're all still sane. See if Sean's customers are queuing up for advice, and us to see if we've actually managed to get through CDS. Interestingly, governments so far haven't come up with, or even suggested that they're going to come up with funding for training on CDS, where there was an awful lot of government funding trying to increase the number of customs agents to bridge the 55 million to 250 million customs clearance that we're now seeing, and we will see as the EU kicks off. So closing comments from people. If you had to say, because I understand that polls are the key thing these days, of most popular things. So I'm 0 to 10, 0 being very worried and 10 being extremely confident. Where would you pitch yourself in terms of how you think we're going to go over the next 6 months? And we'll whiz round this. So Neil, 0 to 10.
I think we still have a number of challenges ahead. 1st of July being very significant, and obviously CDS. So I actually think it's still going to be a very bumpy road this year. So I would probably go no higher than a 5 miles, I think.
Whoa. Go on, Sean.
Before Neil said 5, I was going to come down in the middle with a 5 as well, because, I can see things still being problematic and lots of challenges out there for certainly my clients. You've just got to get ahead of the game, really, and know what's going on. So I'm going to come in the middle as well on a 5.
Alan?
I'm going to be a bit more optimistic and say 6. Whether it's through planning or fortuitous, the implementation of CDS for imports in September will at least give time for the massive volumes of EIDR declarations to be processed prior to the full CDS implementation. So that by the end of July, all of those declarations, EIDR, must have been submitted. So that will give a little bit of breathing space.
Well, there you go, because my cup's always half full, and I was going to say 7, but I'm going to come down to 6.5. Many thanks to all of you for listening. Thank you for all contributing, for those actually on the call today. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Alan. I'm going to leave you with a telephone number. So Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs have published a helpline if you're concerned and you have any problems. It's open 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock Monday to Friday and 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock on weekends. The telephone number is 03000 322 9434. So after that free advert for HMRC, thank you very much for listening. If you've got any subjects in the future you would like us to talk about, please don't be slow coming forward to it. And we look forward to speaking to you again in the future. Happy New Year, if I can still say that, and have a good weekend.
Thank you for listening to the Compliance Experts podcast. We highly value your input and welcome any questions, thoughts or challenges for us to tackle in forthcoming episodes. Vartan Consultancy pride themselves in helping customers manage risk and subsequently helping them improve their overall company performance. To speak to Miles and his team, visit vartanconsultancy.com. This podcast is produced and managed by podtalk.co.uk and is the copyright of Vartan Consultancy. This podcast is created for entertainment purposes only. Views and opinions are that of Vartan Consultancy and their guests. Information recorded in this episode was deemed correct at the time of recording. However, we advise you to always check with Vartan Consultancy for up-to-date information and legislation.